As we know, the situation in Ukraine continues to go from bad to worse. The most recent reports, of course, concern, I can't even begin to describe the situation in that town outside of Kyiv named Busha, where atrocities took place, war crimes took place. And all this while now over 4 million refugees have been created, people leaving, of course, the scene to try to go to anywhere they can in the world. A lot of them, it seems, wanting to come to Canada. And much as Canada has talked about wanting to accommodate them, and there have been some changes made to our immigration rules to accommodate them, there are still people saying it's not enough, it's still taking too long, and there is still too much red tape. Sean Fraser is Canada's immigration minister. He's on the line right now. Mr. Fraser, thank you for your time.
It's a pleasure to be with you. Thank you.
Can we address that right off the top, this idea that even with the changes to rules that you have eased to allow these people to come here, there is still too much red tape? We're hearing people now making claims saying it takes months to have their claims processed. Other people saying some of the rules don't make sense. You can have a child get in, but you can't have their parent get in. Where are we on this?
So look, the starting point for me to understand the scale of the challenges, I think you have to understand both the scale of the conflict and how the numbers are holding up in terms of the applications that are coming in and are being processed. So you would understand, I think, when you're dealing with a situation as you've described with more than 4 million people fleeing westward in a matter of weeks, that the situation is unlike anything that we've ever dealt with. We did stand up a new and expedited regime to approve people for travel to Canada, and it opened just a little more than 2 weeks ago. We've now seen more than 90,000 applications to our system, and despite the fact that there's a 2-week processing time frame, and it just opened a little more than 2 weeks ago, there's already been more than 14,500 people approved to come to Canada through that program, in addition to the nearly 8,000 that were approved before the new regime came into play. So from my perspective, despite the fact that there are still immense challenges with logistics on the ground that we're working to solve, there are a significant number of people who are accessing and getting through the process. We continue to do more every day. We are monitoring the migration flows in the region so we can move resources, both human resources and equipment, to the areas where we do see bigger numbers coming in. We're going to be opening additional spaces in Warsaw and Berlin very soon. Recently sent new teams into places like Bucharest, Bratislava, Vienna, and elsewhere in the region to really continue to put resources where we see the volume coming through. And we're going to continue to watch that very closely and adjust as necessary.
So great to hear that things are moving along and that the processing is happening. But processing is one thing, and you know this. I'm not telling you anything you don't know. Actually getting them here and having them safely taken care of is another thing. Where are we at with that? When can we expect to see these tens of thousands of Ukrainians arriving in Canada?
So it's a challenging question to answer for very specific reasons. I would point out that the data I most recently looked at was going back to January 1st. Some of those people may have had travel plans already. Many would have come as a result of the further invasion into Ukraine by Russia. But we've now seen more than 12,000 Ukrainians arrive in Canada in addition to those applications and approvals that I mentioned just a moment ago. But one of the unique challenges is because this is not a normal refugee resettlement project where we take people to specific communities when settlement agencies and host communities are ready to receive them. We've opened the doors to people to come as soon as they're ready to travel. One unique facet that I wasn't necessarily anticipating that I've heard through my counterparts in Newfoundland who've established a presence on the ground is that a lot of people who are applying to the Canadian program are taking this visa out essentially as an insurance policy because they want to stay as close to Ukraine as possible. They're holding out hope that at some point in time it will be safe for them to go back, and they're taking a wait-and-see approach before they actually take the chance to travel to Canada potentially with their family. Of course, we've established an open work permit with a validity period of up to 3 years. So some people are waiting. Some I expect now that the approvals are rolling in every day will travel in the near term. But I anticipate that some will wait potentially a few months. And if they have another stable solution in another European country, they may choose not to come at all despite their entitlement to. This is one of the trickier aspects of managing this completely novel situation is that we've created a new system from scratch and are addressing these kinds of realities on a day-to-day basis in real time as the human behavior patterns reveal themselves for people who've just been through such an extraordinarily traumatic experience. We're going to continue to monitor the human behavior side of this and adjust our policies as necessary to ensure that we can facilitate the transit of people here who wish to come and to support them after they arrive.
Speaking with Canada's Immigration Minister, Sean Fraser, about the situation now for Ukrainians trying to flee that country or whatever country they have gone to or left Ukrainian to go to for the time being. The National Post story, Minister Fraser, talks about this idea of biometrics. And as I mentioned off the top, one of the issues is that the way the ruling is, or the way the regulations are now set up, a child can come into the country and avoid that, but a parent can't necessarily above a certain age. Has that been addressed, or are you in the midst of addressing that? Where are we on that?
So let's just reflect on why we had this measure in place to begin with. We made a decision in the early days of our response to use a visitor's visa regime rather than just going with a blanket visa-free travel for a couple of reasons. Our primary motivation was speed, because if we left the system in place and paired off a lot of the barriers that usually lead to a finding of inadmissibility, we found that we were able to set up a new system in 2 weeks. That's what we said on the day we announced it, and 2 weeks later the system was open taking applications. If we had gone through a true visa waiver, including biometrics, we would have had to issue what's called an electronic travel authorization. The process of setting that up, including the regulatory changes and changes to the private sector airline systems as well as the systems used at airports, would have taken us 12 to 14 weeks, and I didn't think we had 12 to 14 weeks. Now that we are moving forward, it's important that we also remember that when we made a decision to take an unlimited number of applications from those fleeing the war in Ukraine, I think it's important that we have some aspect of security screening if we're dealing with huge numbers of people, particularly when we know that in the Donbass region in eastern Ukraine, there have been pro-Russian Ukrainians fighting against Ukrainians for the past 8 years. This could potentially protect against people harming the security interests of Canada, but also the Ukrainians who are seeking to come to Canada as part of that effort. What we're doing is using a data-informed approach to reduce the requirements for those low-risk cohorts. That's why we waived not just the ordinary waiver for people under 14, but for young people aged 14 to 17 as well, for people aged over 60, for people who've come to Canada before and have a travel history where they followed the rules and we don't believe they pose any security threat. To the extent that the data demonstrates we can implement other measures to facilitate the transit of people to Canada, certainly we will look at those. But exempting these groups from the biometric requirements also gives us a little bit of additional capacity, because if they're not taking up the appointments, other people who are in the queue will be able to get those appointments faster. When you build a system like this out of nothing with limited notice, and you do have the ability to adjust on the ground, you would be a fool not to take it. But we don't want to compromise on the importance of that security screening phase now that we have the systems up that have the capacity to be flexible and move units and people to where they're most needed.
Minister Fraser, are we really ready for this influx of Ukrainians once it actually begins to happen?
You know what? You never know when you're dealing with these kinds of things until you see it working in real time. But my sense is we are as prepared as we could possibly be. I take that position not out of a sense of hope and optimism, but having been part of the preparations and having been watching the data since January 19th. So we struck up an internal task force on that date, and we started moving additional people and biometrics into the region in Vienna and Bucharest and Warsaw and elsewhere to ensure we had the capacity to move people quickly. We also started pulling out every application we had in our system and expediting the processing them of those applications while we were waiting to set up the new and even faster system. Both the old process and the new process appear to be working well. But to your point, it's not enough just to get people here. We have to ensure that they're supported when they arrive. Mm-hmm. Look, there's a number of things we've implemented already with new settlement supports, from language training to employment assistance to finding settlement agencies to help with the soft skills of adjusting to life in a new neighborhood. We've reached a contract with the Canadian Red Cross to provide airport reception services, where they're going to be educating people on how to apply for a social insurance number, telling them what resources exist in their communities. Of course, we're attaching open work permits to the process so people can support themselves if they're in a place where they're able to work. But there are other things we need to continue to work on to ensure people are supported. But there's one thing that I take a lot of comfort in. the number one thing coming into my office, not just as the Minister of Immigration, but as the Member of Parliament for Central Nova, is that people want to help. Mm-hmm. Canadians are showing their very best, saying, I would like to make a contribution, whether it's financial, whether it's to hire someone through the Jobs for Ukraine website we've set up, or whether it's to literally open up their homes in many instances. Corporate Canada is making calls to our office left and right saying, we want to help, we want to make a donation. So coordinating the goodwill that we're seeing coming from Canadian communities, from the private sector, is a major point of focus for me right now. Because if we do the job the right way, we're going to be able to support people very well. And of course, we need to continue to have conversations with our provincial and territorial counterparts about the services that they hold responsibility for to make sure that people are taken care of when they arrive. These things continue to evolve on an hourly or daily basis, and we're going to continue to watch as people arrive. But my sense is, with the strength of the Ukrainian-Canadian community, with the strength of the outpouring of support we've seen, and with the decisions we've already taken or will be taking, my sense is that we're going to be able to not only handle the volume of people, but I think it's going to serve our self-interest to have people come into our communities at a time when we're dealing with challenging circumstances on the back end of this pandemic, and to know that we're doing it for the right reasons for one of our allies in the world gives me faith that we're on the right track.
Minister Fraser, thank you so much for your time. Very much appreciate it.
It's a pleasure to be with you. Thank you so much.
Sean Fraser, Canada's Immigration Minister. Yes, still work to be done, but as you said, or as he said,
how great to hear
no
that.
one could have possibly expected this, right?